Almost 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught this story about a group of people who were traveling on a boat. One of them took a drill and began to drill a hole in the bottom of the boat just under where he was sitting. His companions shouted frantically, "Why are you doing that?" The man replied, "Why are you concerned? Am I not drilling a hole under my own place?" And they answered, "Yes, but you will flood the boat for all of us." This midrash, excuse the pun, drifts to my mind now because it reminds us that we're all in the same boat. We're navigating uncharted waters. And in the same boat, it's not just the boat of today, but the ancient boat of 2,000 years ago. The risks to everyone in the same boat then were just as real as the risks are to us now. In ancient times, everyone on the boat had responsibility based on need and their skill. And everyone was required to contribute to the safety and well-being of everybody else. In times of peril, no one can survive without help from another. Now as then, when we speak of life and survival, everyone is in the same boat. My dad's a Navy man. He has a passion for sailing. My brothers and I grew up spending our weekends as part of the family crew on a humble sailboat, and it was truly humble. It only had a small outboard motor, and my father rarely liked to use it. And when I hear the expression, "we're all in the same boat," I understand the expression to mean much more than sharing a common, vulnerable vessel in our journey on the great sea of life. Those years on our family's sailboat taught me about the illusion of being in control. The ocean is vast and powerful. We, on the other hand, are small waves in that ocean. And we don't control our surroundings. We can't control the strength of the wind. We can't control the choppiness of the water. A sailboat teaches us that we can only control the boat we're on and what it's capable of. We get to decide how far to let the sails out, where to tie the sails, when to lower the sails. We choose the direction the boat will go by the direction the rudder faces. And when there are a few members on the crew, we can shift the weight to one side or the other. We can't control the weather. We can only control how we react to the weather. In a couple of hours during the Yom Kippur Mincha service, we're going to read from the book of Jonah. And the book begins with Jonah on a boat. And we read how God cast a mighty wind upon the sea, and the boat was in danger of breaking up. And in their fright, the sailors called out. Being on a boat in rough water can be frightening. The sailors on Jonah's boat tried as hard as they could to navigate the choppy seas. But the book of Jonah describes how the sea just grew more and more stormier about them. Ultimately, Jonah had to choose a solution for how to save the others, and he had himself cast overboard. Fortunately, God had plans for how to save Jonah in the belly of that great whale. We read that even though the sailors tried everything in their power to deal with the storm, Jonah had only one choice for how to respond, and the rest was up to God. Our lives are lived on that great sea of life. Each of us rides the sea and the sailboat of our own mortality. Sometimes the sea is calm. In these circumstances, we find it easy to navigate. But sometimes there are storms with mighty winds, and such terrible waves that our boat can be in danger of capsizing or breaking up. As the storm in the sea roils and surrounds us, we too become frightened. When a storm arises, we have no illusions about our power. We're not in control. We can only choose how to respond. These days, we all ride the choppy waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. We feel frustrated trying to sail on our life's journey. Since March, in our own congregation, over 50 families have grieved the loss of a loved one. In a few cases, husbands and wives died within a few days of each other. The children and the grandchildren have had to grieve while following restrictive social distancing guidelines. We had to stream graveside services on Zoom, and Shiva Minyanim were held in the same way. Hugs and kisses could only happen in the same home. I comforted so many who couldn't be at graveside because of COVID-19. And with every heartbreaking loss, there was one or more of these sad circumstances. Parents who couldn't embrace their child. Loved ones who couldn't visit the hospital to say a final goodbye. Siblings who couldn't hold each other while grieving the loss of a parent. Children and grandchildren who had to stay 6 feet from their parents and grandparents in Mass, where they could only show the top quarter of their face, and the tears wept were all that was visible. Right now, our boat is sailing on very choppy waters. We have little control. We can only choose how we respond. As we approach Yizkor in the midst of remembering our loved ones, our rituals remind us that we're all in the same boat. We're navigating uncharted waters. We're not in control. We can't ordain that someone doesn't get sick. We can't eliminate accidents. We can't stop aging. The only option we can control is how we respond to what happens. We are a small wave in the great ocean of life. Like experienced sailors of olden days, we can come together and support each other. We can control ourselves and how we react to the conditions around us. When we lose a loved one, we can mourn. And we can also celebrate the blessings they brought to us. We decide how far to let the sails fly, when to restrain them. We choose the direction our rudder will face. And even in this era of social distancing, our family and friends can shift their weight from one side to the other so we can stay upright and avoid capsizing or breaking up. It's a difficult journey, but I want to share with you a true story that I think helps. Manuel is a physical trainer, but he's known to everyone as Moose. And Moose went on a trip to Tel Aviv. And there he had a unique experience with a group of people who were blind that humbled him and ultimately opened his eyes to a whole new perspective on life. He opened his essay, "The Blind Skipper Asked Us, Can you see the wind?" Moose wasn't sure how to respond. He thought to himself, I can certainly feel the wind, but see it? And Moose then shared the experience that gave him the gift of seeing the wind. He was on a sailboat trip led by the Israeli nonprofit called Etgarim, which means challenges in Hebrew. Etgarim was founded 25 years ago by a group of disabled veterans of the Israel Defense Forces. It's run by the Israel Association for the Disabled. Etgarim's focus is to help educate, inspire, and empower disabled people to participate in extreme sports such as sailing, cycling, rock climbing, and more. And their unique program is run entirely by volunteers. It aims to rehabilitate physically and mentally challenged adults, children, and teenagers. Over the years, a number of Etgarim's athletes have competed and won at Paralympic events around the world. So Moose describes how he joined the crew of a handful of blind sailors, and he spent a day on the water with his eyes shut, and yet came to see things more clearly than ever. He writes, after the initial orientation, he was promptly blindfolded and led to the dock. He describes it this way: I placed my hand on my guide's shoulder, and we began our walk to the clubhouse to our boat. Time seemed to crawl by. My nerves were getting the better of me. Distracted by my newfound blindness, I found myself second-guessing every step. It only got worse, and I became more aware of the growing lump in my stomach. It was challenging trying to situate myself in my surroundings while blindfolded, but even more difficult to fully immerse myself in the experience. My guide led me part of the way without auditory or visual cues. My full trust had to be placed in my guide, and I could only signal him by tapping or gripping his shoulder. It was an unbelievable experience, and if we hadn't even gotten into the boat yet. Once we made it down to the dock, it was time to board the sailboat. I felt trepidation. I felt trepidation as my guide directed me over the gap between the boat and the dock. Truth be told, I don't have sea legs. And when you remove my ability to see, you can imagine how comical this experience was. I envisioned myself tumbling into what I imagined to be a gaping chasm separating dock from the boat. Only much later did I find out that the gaping chasm had actually only been 6 inches. My patient guide helped me find my bearings. I plopped myself into the boat. Then he handed me a line, and I was ready for the next phase of this unique journey. I felt the sun shining on my face. The winds were blowing, and at first as we set off, the waters seemed calm. But soon the boat was rocking. We were picking up speed, and coupled with my inability to see where we were going, my other senses seemed overloaded. My stomach was churning more than the water beneath us. I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to be sick. I took some deep breaths. I concentrated. I became mindful of my experience. I was slowly finding my groove, and I could feel my adrenaline spiking as my excitement grew. I thought to myself, oh my God, we are blind, but we're sailing. He concluded that it was an epic, once-in-a-lifetime experience. When Moose returned to the dock and his blindfold was removed, he took time to process his experience, and he wrote, after the initial essay, the following. He realized he learned 3 important life lessons from the blind sailors who would help him see the wind. He learned first that when you're down, keep going. Second, you have many senses. Use them all. And finally, life is an adventure, so roll with it. The 3 lessons Moose picked up on are exactly what we all need to learn. We're all in the same boat now amidst a pandemic storm, and to a great extent, we're sailing blind. But we have to keep going. There's no turning back, no matter how bad the storm gets. We must keep going. Life has many positive things to offer, no matter our situation. If we become focused on the negative or things outside of our control, it can be hard to move on. The Israeli sailors Moose met lost their sight in military combat, but they never lost their passion for life. They took hold of a higher vision, and they're able to see life more vividly than most. As we all travel in the same boat right now, we too have other senses we can use. Although the physical ability to see is our most dominant human sense, looking doesn't always mean we're seeing. We also have to listen to the needs of others. We have to be responsive. We have to figure out how to comfort one another, even while social distancing. The blind sailors used their heightened sense of awareness to their advantage. By feeling the breeze, they knew exactly which way to turn to gain optimum speed. The ebb and flow of the water on the bow told them how fast they were going, cued them for what was to come. We have to focus our attention to look, listen, and feel. We have to do this so we can travel in the direction of good health while supporting one another. Life is an adventure. The blind Israeli sailors told Moose, always keep a positive mindset. Always believe in your abilities. Always know everything is possible. Thousands of years ago, our Torah summarized this mantra for the Jewish people. We're so familiar with the verse, but we need to say it like a mantra. God places before us life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life. Moose began his story asking the blind skipper's question, can you see the wind? He learned the answer is yes, when you work hard at it. And the Hebrew word for wind and spirit is the same, ruach. Can we see God's Spirit in our life? Can we feel God's Spirit? Can we embrace God's Spirit? We have the choice of what we want to see, to touch, and to feel. In the shadow that's the valley of death, do we collapse our sails? Do we sit forlorn and unmoving, frozen and stuck in place? Do we rail against the wind? Do we throw up our sails and try to race to some imagined island that's free of pain and loss? Or do we take a deep breath, accept things as they are, focus our energy on what we can control? We can navigate slowly and cautiously. We can tack, we can adjust to the circumstances no matter how many times it's necessary. We can protect and maneuver ourselves to the course of action we prefer. Yizkor is our annual ritual of sailing into a sea filled with whitecaps. There's turbulence, high and low waves of emotion that makes it difficult. Yizkor is challenging. We embrace loss and mourning. But we can choose to ride our love and our memories to navigate these rough waters. We can use our senses to remember the blessings we shared with our loved ones. These memories become an enduring gift that serves as a compass for our own life. Yizkor reminds us that amid the choppy seas of life, our loved ones are with us, guiding us, and inspiring us. Yizkor harnesses the winds of change. James Michener wrote, "A human being moves best when it's slightly athwart the wind, when it has to keep its sails tight and attend its course. Ships, like men, do poorly when the wind is directly behind, pushing them sloppily on their way so that no care is required in steering or in the management of sails. The wind seems favorable, for it blows in the direction one is heading, but actually it's destructive because it induces relaxation in tension and in skill. What is needed is a wind slightly opposed to the ship. Then tension can be maintained, juices can flow, ideas can germinate for ships like men, like women, respond to challenge. This is what Yizkor does for us. Grief and sadness challenge us, and in response, what do we do during Yizkor? We pledge acts of charity and goodness. We pledge to perform good deeds because that's how we offer to help keep the soul of our loved one bound up in the bond of life as an enduring source of blessing. So let's approach now our Yizkor service as a challenging wind we need to accompany our journey on this great sea of life. And since right now we're all in choppy waters, may each of us soon awaken to a dawn filled with calm in which we can experience gratitude for the gifts our loved ones gave us in life. And may those gifts and memories carry us forward safely on our journey, and let us say, Amen.